Hey folks, welcome to Game Devs Contest. I'm Henry Golding, and today I wanted to talk about the top 5 reasons that game developers think they don't have time to write high quality code. There's many different ways that we could define that. I'm going to choose to define it today as code that is well organized and has tests that provide a safety net that allow it to change easily and safely. So it's code that people enjoy working with and they know that when they make changes, things aren't going to break. So I thought this would be a useful topic because really almost every game developer that I talk to have spoken to over the last decade and a half almost, when the topic of can I invest in high quality code comes up. Almost universally, people will say some shade of, well, it's really important to me, but I just don't have time. And I think that's really important to dig into because programmers, especially programmers in the games industry, are incredibly passionate people about their craft, about the product they're creating. These are not the kind of people who like doing a sloppy job. And in fact, it really burns them to have to do a sloppy job. So I think it's really important to dig into why they may feel like they have to do a sloppy job sometimes. So without further ado, here's my top 5, which I'll go in reverse order. So number 5, they lack skills. So it's not very common in the industry to have the skills that enable you to write well-structured code covered by tests that can be easily changed. The practices that get you there are things like continuous delivery, test-driven development, refactoring. And when I say refactoring, I'm using refactoring in the sense that Martin Fowler uses it, not in the sense that most folks in our industry use it. I'll probably do another video about that. So it's reasonable that folks may not have the skills, and that is actually quite solvable. You can quite easily train people in techniques like refactoring, tests to make sure that things keep working, and refactoring doesn't have to be a huge rewrite that is very unsafe. In fact, the actual practice of refactoring is inherently incredibly safe and emphasizes having a working build at every single point. So that's training. And we may wonder why there is not that skill set in the industry. I think there's many things that explain it. There's the general lack of adoption in the industry, so it's not necessarily common for other people to have these skills. And a lot of the way skills get transmitted are from other people that you work with. So if you don't work with anyone who knows these skills, then you might struggle to pick them up, unless you're highly motivated to go off and learn them on your own. So in all of those circumstances, I think what can really help is to have some training. So there are many ways that you can connect with people who know how this stuff works, and it might be outside the games industry. So look for software crafter or craftspersonship meetups in your area. Those are typically very passionate communities who love to teach people these skills. You can go to online code retreats. There's a Global Day of Code retreat. Many folks will do an online code retreat. There are also books that are available if that works for you. There are online courses. And of course, you can hire someone like me to come train you if you feel that that's necessary. Okay, so that's lacking the skills. Number 4, they lack the tools. Even if you have the skills, you may not have the tools available in your workflow to be able to apply those practices. I'll use myself as an example. When I started on the Minecraft gameplay team, there actually were several test frameworks available, and there was a mandate coming down from above to say, we would like you to write tests, please. And I was, with my work on Sea of Thieves, of course, highly motivated to work in that way. I really wanted to write tests, and I was unable to make those tools work for me. They just were too high friction. It took too long to set up the situations that I needed to test, and then too long to run them, and too long to get feedback, if I could even get feedback at all. So there were many points in that process that, while at a casual glance, the tools existed to support high-quality software development, in practice, those tools were unusable for the people who actually were trying to make the software. So what do you do in that case? Well, again, to use the example of Minecraft, in that case, I pitched people to form a team. I said, can I have 1 or 2 people to go work on this? I'm pretty sure that we can make tools that work for people. And then after a year or 2, we had a really good result. So there's definitely an avenue where you can internally create a team. If you don't have those skills internally, you can hire someone in. You could hire someone on a contract. You could hire a consultant like me, or you could go to your local community, see what other people are doing. For example, in this particular context, there's the Automated Testing Roundtable Discord that I talk about a lot, and that is a great place to ask people questions like this. Okay, so moving on from the technical problems onto the cultural. Number 3, they have got in trouble in the past for trying to write high quality code, or they've seen someone else get in trouble for it. Now, I think this is actually extremely common. We've all seen that one person on the team who's like super into software quality and they want to try new things and they're pushing the envelope, and sometimes they get kind of shut down. People are like, look, okay, I get that you're into this stuff, just set it aside, go, work on the stuff. We're here to churn out code and churn out features. That's what we're here to do. And it's very unfortunate. Of course, in those examples, it's very possible for someone to go too far or to go further than the team around them is actually ready for. That's a different issue. But typically, those people are the people who are going to level up your entire organization, your entire process of how you make games. And so I would encourage them and cultivate their passion and leverage it for the good of all. So you've either seen someone like this get in trouble, or you've got in trouble yourself. Right, and by trouble, I mean you might have just been given a hint. Hey, I think you should be maybe focusing on delivering features, or maybe it might be phrased as you're a bit slow. You really should up your output because that's what matters to us. Or you're really not focusing on the right thing, or you're just not in tune with the rest of the team. All of those kind of things are ways to completely discourage not only that one person on the team and demoralize them and waste their incredible passion for improvement that you could have been leveraging, but also there's a blast radius around them where anyone who's seen that happen is now effectively scarred. And so I was trying to think of what's the antidote to that, and facetiously I could say therapy. But in a practical sense, I think things that the team can do, or that the organization can do, or management can do, is to provide counterexamples. I think it's something like, I forget, but I think it's for every negative thing that humans perceive, it takes 5 or 10 positive things to balance that out, because evolutionarily it was beneficial to us to put a lot of our attention on things that might hurt us. So providing counterexamples, celebrating examples of people creating cool new tools that save everyone a ton of time, really celebrate those, reward those people. And of course, in the context of all of this, money is a big deal too. Typically, all of those things that I've talked about, like you're a bit slow, you're not really on board with the rest of the team, this isn't our culture, those things typically translate into poor performance reviews, whatever that looks like at your company or in your context, and that typically translates into less money. So there's incredible structural disincentives when this kind of thing happens. All right, so moving on to number 2. This one is on a similar vein to the last one, but this is where the organization or the team resists change. So they may pay lip service to the idea of we want to change or we want to improve our process. But in reality, it's pretty clear that there are some folks who really are not on board. And those folks might have power. They might have influence. There might be a producer, a lead programmer, a director, anyone in a position of power, or even influential senior ICs, principal level ICs. All of those folks, they're kind of late in their career and they might tend to have really strong opinions. And those opinions are pretty obvious. Maybe they say it explicitly. This is a bad idea. I'm phrasing it nicely. I've heard it said a lot more harshly than that. We don't have time for this. This isn't the way that software gets made. And that's really natural. Change is hard. And not all change is good. So it's natural that, especially when you've reached a pretty senior position, you're going to be biased towards the things that got you there. And I think I'll do another video about this, but I think the thing to remember here is that the industry has changed, and what got us here is not going to get us there. We're not going to be, I don't think there's a world 10 years from now where we have massive manual test teams testing every single change that we put out. And I imagine that at that point we will be expected to be able to release on a pretty much constant basis. Even right now, there is a regular cadence of release that never existed in the games industry before. The first game that I worked on, we burned it onto a disk and we were done. We washed our hands of it, there's nothing we could do even. And so the practices that evolved for testing those kind of games, where it was critical that you got something onto the disk that was in a good enough state to be playable, those practices are no longer what's going to help us move forward in a live service world. Okay, so antidote to resistance in the organizational team. And I think it's culture, it's coaching, it's managers and other senior folks addressing those things. So when you see a senior person presenting a negative opinion about change or improvements, engage in that conversation. Don't just let it be, and push them. And they may well be right, but if we don't have the conversation, we'll never know. So be aware of that bias towards allowing senior people to shut down conversation without really listening. Okay, so we've reached number one. The number one reason that game programmers believe, quite deeply and sincerely often, that they do not have time or are not allowed to focus on producing high quality software is because you told them. So either you're one of those people that we just talked about in the last example, and you've explicitly told them, look, I don't care about all this TDD stuff and refactoring. That's not how we do things around here. Look, just get your nose to the grindstone, churn out the stuff that's going to have predictable results. And again, I think that's not what is going to move us forward in the industry. And we're going to have to adapt and build flexible, passionate workforces rather than people who can crunch out, the latest sequel to whatever, right, on the existing technology. I don't want to digress too much on that. I plan to do a video about that topic as well. But I'll just say I started out in the industry in a work-for-hire studio. And of course, in that situation, it makes a lot of sense to say, tell us exactly what to make. We'll make it. And I think that's how a lot of really successful and impactful games are going to get made in the future, right? It's going to be much more dynamic, much more reactive. And that's why we're going to need these techniques and the technical practices that keep us able to be that flexible. All right. So let's say you're saying, look, Henry, I would never say anything like that. I totally believe in the value of this stuff. I have been asking for it for years. In fact, I keep telling people, look, I really want you to focus on this. I just don't understand why they're not doing it. Well, the answer might be because, you told them without telling them. So through your actions, you can also send a very clear message, especially for those folks who might have been traumatized by past experiences, which is most people. You can send a very clear message just by, kind of talking out of one side of the mouth and out of the other side of the mouth, right? So you can say, look, I'm really bought into these practices. I totally get that we need them. I really want you to prioritize those. In fact, I'm going to reward people who prioritize those things and punish people who don't. So far, so good. And then you might say, yeah, of course I expect, everything, all the features that I wanted done to get done. Well, you're telling them without telling them. Because the reality is that if you're trying to make some kind of substantial change to your development process, which you hope to reap the rewards of down the line, it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. People will need time to learn new skills. There'll need to be investment in either buying in the tools or making the tools internally. There's going to be training needed. It's a big deal. And if I think about Sea of Thieves, where from the very start, everyone was very clear on this is a radical change. We need to change everything. I think it's very possible to accidentally tell people that you want them to skimp on quality. The antidote to that, of course, it's a cultural issue, but I would say ask people. Ask them, hey, do you feel that you are empowered to do the kind of activities that you believe will bring quality to the product? Are you empowered? Do you feel like I'm empowering you? And then listen, because you might find out something very interesting. All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, folks, for being with me on this channel. I'm Henry, and remember, despite what you may have heard to the contrary, game devs can test.